I'd open up and say if you've got them, smoke them, but then I'd have to arrest you all, but that's okay. I have one major drawback. My wife is a communications consultant specializing in presentation skills. So every time I give a speech or a presentation, she grades me based, of course, on my truthfulness. But the three things I'm not supposed to do. One, I'm not supposed to sit and talk to my slides. I can't do that here because I'd knock myself out. Number two, I'm supposed to pick one person or two people in the audience and speak right to them. Well, I can't see anybody because the light's blinding me. And then I have to avoid the notorious fig leaf. I don't know if you know what the fig leaf is. Your speaker is like this. I don't know what that signifies, but I can't do that here because I have the lectern. In any event, no comments. This is an interesting topic, and when you think about the ramifications and the potentials for business opportunities, it takes you a while to get your arms around it, because when you think of a disaster situation, the normal response is it's a human tragedy, it's a financial tragedy. Where is it that private security fits in? Keep in mind one thing, that any disaster situation, be it natural or man-made, the public sector has very limited resources, particularly in the current budget environment. I actually live in the state of California, and I work closely with their Office of Emergency Services under the governor's office. Technically, they're bankrupt. So if we had a disaster in California, we'd be hurting. And I would think it's a fair statement to say a lot of states are in a similar position. The state resources will be overwhelmed very quickly. So when you think of a disaster situation and what role private security can play, without sounding too much like an ambulance chaser, because it really is incorrect, there are tremendous opportunities for business development and growth. There are opportunities to enhance revenue, to establish new clients, and to work on new relationships. And what I intend to talk about is my evaluation, or my firm's evaluation, of how you do that, how you position yourself to develop new business opportunities. First, I'd like to take you through several of the better-known disaster situations. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires, earthquakes. I think we all remember Hurricane Andrew, 1992. This is a picture of a town in Florida called The Lakes. It basically doesn't exist anymore. It was totally wiped out. The damage from this hurricane, $40.7 billion with 65 fatalities. I guess I'm showing my computer skills. I'm touching my mouse. Better just use those. I'll just use that. What did you push? The down button? Down button. Okay. Hurricane Katrina, how could we forget? 89.6 billion in damage, 1,464 fatalities, over 700 people still missing. Figure that one out. That was in 2005. Actually, from an insurance perspective, there was 2008 Hurricane Ike. Total losses were much less than Katrina, 24 billion, but the insured losses were primarily focused in Galveston, Houston, primarily Houston and the petroleum industry. A lot of major petroleum infrastructure was destroyed. Mississippi River flood, 1993, 15 billion in damages, 50 fatalities. This is a subject that's near and dear to me, wildfires. Seems to specialize in California. This is a picture of Santa Barbara wildfires. There was just a recent one in Santa Barbara, over 80 homes destroyed. But last year, I think, was probably the worst. There was a time in November when the entire city of Los Angeles was surrounded by wildfires. And I actually happened to, that's why I say it's near and dear to my heart. There are two things that make it near and dear to my heart. I actually have a ranch that I live on in a town called Paso Robles in the central coast of California. It's wine country. I sit about 10 miles on a hill from the runway of the local airport where a great percentage of the California fire bombers are based. So when they take off to fight wildfires, they fly right over my house. And it's quite an awesome sight to see some of these tankers with that orange stuff dripping out, which of course drips down on my house, but it's a fire retardant. See them taking off round the clock, day and night, fighting these wildfires. The one that came home most poignantly to me, there was one in San Fernando Valley area called Slimar. 600 to 800 mobile homes were destroyed overnight when the fire swept through. It was only a 2,000 acre fire. 2 days after it happened, I happened to drive by on Highway 5, which connects Northern and Southern California. And the fire trucks are still there, still soaking down the area. The steam was coming up. People's homes were destroyed. Their entire lives were destroyed. This is a picture from the marina area of San Francisco after what they call the Loma Prieta earthquake. 13 billion in damages, 69 fatalities. And those of us who are New Yorkers will never forget this. September 11th, 34.45 billion in damages, 2,750 people killed in New York alone. And then Oklahoma City, $650 million in damages, 169 fatalities. And then, of course, there are other man-made events such as riots. If we all remember the Rodney King riots in 1998, lasted for 6 days, 1 billion in property damage, 53 fatalities. So let's talk about security. Where does security fit in, and how does private security interact or play a role? Well, the basic role of private security is to protect lives and property. Sort of sounds like what a law enforcement officer does. But law enforcement officers, during these situations, their resources are totally stretched and overwhelmed. Or you could have a situation like New Orleans, where a lot of them just didn't even show up to work because they took care of their families first. So standing fixed posts, patrolling, taking care of your client or whoever your contract relation is, their property, deterring looting and curiosity seekers. It's interesting, I have a lot of vignettes to go with the presentation. I have a neighbor who's a California Highway Patrol officer, and he was responding to the Northridge earthquake, and he was in Northern California, and they all jumped in their CHP cars. If you've watched TV, you know what a CHP car looks like, because everybody watched Chips. And they go screaming down the freeways to get down to Northridge, which is just north of Los Angeles, and they couldn't get there because the roads had collapsed. So just thinking of the role of law enforcement and what they do and how they deploy, sometimes they can't because they suffer the same fate that we, the average citizen, do. They couldn't get there. People couldn't get home. People couldn't get to work. People couldn't get anywhere. The roads collapsed. When they arrived, first thing they did, because they were deployed to a certain area, is drive by, I think it was a Best Buy store, he told me. There were lines of people walking out with products. They'd smash the windows and loading them on trucks. They had no orders to stop looters. They went to their assigned post, as far as they were concerned, private industry, on their own. So you see pictures of a lot of shopkeepers in these areas sitting out front of their stores with shotguns. Most corporations don't have people who work for them who are going to sit outside their store with shotguns. You're not going to find many managers doing that. But the role of private security can be well identified in advance. Just some other areas, removing valuables, removing cash. Where I live and work in San Francisco, the Silicon Valley area, a lot of very valuable high-tech research type and products are stored in a lot of the buildings in that area. And we are very, very prone to earthquakes there. Distribution of food and water, not really the role of private security, but providing security for the distribution centers. These are places where people come to get food and water. If you've ever seen pictures in some areas of the world, when they start to distribute food, you can have a riot pretty quickly with some desperate people. So being the security cordon, in effect, to protect the people giving out the food and water is important. Not much of a role for private security here. This is generally law enforcement, EMS, National Guard. But you could find yourselves in a position to provide that service in a particularly large plant site or a work environment where they have to assess how much damage has been done. And many times private security, in effect, is the only security in a lot of these sites, so that role becomes that of the contract security officer. This one, recovering victims, doesn't necessarily jump out as an area, but when I talk to some associates who work for the Office of Emergency Services in California, they frequently utilize contract security officers to protect the more